The galaxy had a rule older than empires, older than hyperspace lanes, older even than the Council itself. If something is silent in deep space, it is either dead or hunting. Commander Viral had lived by that rule his entire career. And right now, it was the only thing echoing in his mind. "Confirm the reading," he said, his voice controlled but tight. The sensor officer swallowed, claws hovering over the console. "Confirmed, Commander. Object is still there, bearing unchanged. No emissions, no drift, no anything." "That's not possible," Viral muttered. Deep space was never truly silent. Even the coldest debris radiated heat. Even derelict ships leaked energy signatures like dying breaths. There was always something, some trace, some whisper. But this was absence. And absence didn't exist naturally. The holographic display in the center of the bridge sharpened, magnifying the distant object. Slowly, its shape resolved from static and distortion into something unmistakably artificial. A vessel, long, angular, darker than the void around it. It didn't reflect starlight, it seemed to drink it. "Any identification markers?" Viral asked. "None. Faction signatures?" "None. Power readings?" "None." That last answer lingered too long. Viral leaned forward in his command seat, all four eyes narrowing. "You're telling me we're looking at a ship with no power source?" "I'm telling you," the officer said carefully, "we're looking at something that shouldn't exist." A quiet murmur spread across the bridge crew. Even the veterans looked unsettled. Because they all felt it now. That subtle, creeping wrongness. The ship wasn't just silent. It was deliberately silent. "Helm," Viral said, "hold position, maintain distance." "Yes, Commander." The patrol vessel hovered at the edge of sensor range, engines humming softly. Normally, Viral would have already withdrawn and reported the anomaly to higher command. But something about this pulled at him. Curiosity, instinct, or perhaps something far less rational. "Open a hailing channel." A brief hesitation. "Commander." "Do it." The comm officer complied. Channel open, broadcasting standard greeting. A pulse of encoded signals spread into the void. Identification, intent, peaceful approach protocols. They waited. Nothing answered. "Again," Viral ordered. The message repeated, this time with additional frequency sweeps. Still nothing. No acknowledgement, no reaction, not even interference. The vessel didn't care. Or worse, it was ignoring them. "Commander," one of the tactical officers said quietly, "we should leave." Viral didn't respond immediately. His gaze remained fixed on the display. The ship hadn't moved. Not even slightly. "Deploy a probe," he said at last. That got everyone's attention. "Sir, if it's hostile..." "If it's hostile, we're already in range," Viral cut in. "We need data." The order stood. Moments later, a small reconnaissance drone launched from the patrol ship's underside, its thrusters glowing faintly as it drifted toward the unknown vessel. All eyes tracked its approach. Distance 8,000 meters closing. Any change in the target? Negative. Signal stability. Green across all channels. The probe moved steadily closer, its cameras transmitting high-resolution imagery back to the bridge. At first, the hull of the silent vessel appeared smooth, featureless. But as the drone closed in, details emerged. Lines, subtle patterns, not decorative, functional. Like seams, or joints. "Commander," the sensor officer whispered. "What is it?" "I'm detecting inconsistencies." "In what way?" "It's like the structure isn't fixed. The geometry keeps shifting." Viral frowned. "That's impossible." "I know," the officer replied, "but it's happening." Distance 2,000 meters. The probe slowed, its cameras adjusting focus. The hull now filled the main display, black, seamless, almost liquid in appearance. Then the feed flickered. "Signal disruption," the comm officer said, attempting to stabilize. "Is it interference?" Viral asked. No, it's localized, around the probe. The image warped slightly, as if reality itself bent near the vessel's surface. Distance 1,000 meters. The probe extended its sensor array, scanning deeper. And then, it saw something. Aligned. Thin, perfect, straight across the hull. A seam. Commander marking anomaly. The feed distorted violently. Static tore across the screen. Signal degrading. Pull it back, Viral snapped. Trying no response. For a fraction of a second, the image stabilized. And what it showed made the entire bridge go silent. The seam moved. Not opening. Not separating. But acknowledging. Like an eye noticing it was being watched. Then the feed cut out. No explosion. No debris. No signal trace. The probe simply ceased to exist. A heavy silence fell over the bridge. No one spoke. No one moved. Because they all understood what that meant. Something had reached out and erased it. Commander, someone whispered. Viral didn't answer. He couldn't take his eyes off the display. The ship was still there. Still silent. Still unmoving. But now, it felt different. Aware. Helm, he said slowly, prepare to withdraw. Yes, Commander. The engines began to charge. And that's when it happened. The silent vessel moved. Not fast. Not aggressive. Just a subtle shift, barely noticeable. But unmistakable. It wasn't drifting anymore. It was turning. Toward them. A low, almost imperceptible tone echoed through the sensors. New signal detected, the comm officer said, voice tight. Origin, the unknown vessel. Type. Simple. How simple? The officer hesitated. Then said, a single ping. It echoed once through their systems. Clean, direct, intentional. Like a knock on a door. Or a heartbeat, restarting after a very long time. Every instinct Viral had screamed at him to run. But before he could give the order, the ship finished turning. And for the first time since they found it, the silent vessel was no longer ignoring them. It was facing them, shields up. Commander Viral's voice cut through the silence like a blade. The patrol ship surged with energy as layered defense grids snapped into place, glowing faintly across the hull. The crew moved fast, trained, precise, but there was something different now. They weren't preparing for battle. They were reacting to something they didn't understand. The unknown vessel didn't accelerate, didn't fire, didn't even emit a threat signature. It simply finished turning. Now its entire structure faced them directly, its long, angular body stretching across the void like a blade drawn from shadow. And suddenly, it no longer looked like a derelict. It looked intentional. Designed. Built for a purpose no one on that bridge could name, but all of them could feel. Energy readings spiking, the sensor officer shouted. From where? Viral demanded. The officer's claws trembled over the console. Everywhere. That answer made no sense. Ships had reactors, engines, weapon arrays. Power flowed through defined systems. It had structure, logic. But this vessel, power wasn't coming from a source. It was awakening across the entire hull. Like the ship itself was alive. Commander, the tactical officer said, voice tight, we need to disengage, now. Viral hesitated, and that hesitation would define everything that followed. Hold position, he ordered. He needed answers. Needed data. Needed to understand what they were looking at. Because if this was some lost technology, some forgotten civilization, the implications were enormous. And he would not turn away from that. Enhance visual feed, he said. The holo display sharpened. And that's when the illusion broke. The surface of the vessel shifted. Not like mechanical panels opening. Not like armor plating retracting. It unfolded in ways that defied engineering, segments sliding into non-existent space, structures emerging from within structures, angles bending where no angles should exist. The crew watched in stunned silence. "Commander," someone whispered, "that's not possible." No, it was. And yet it was happening. Weapons began to emerge, sleek black constructs forming seamlessly from the hull itself, not mounted, not attached. Grown. Dozens. Then hundreds. Then more. But something was wrong. Viral leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "They're not targeting multiple vectors." The tactical officer's voice dropped to a whisper. "They're all locking onto us. Every weapon, every system, all focusing on a single point in space. The patrol ship." A chill spread through the bridge. "This is a mistake," Viral said, more to himself than anyone else. Then, the signal came again. Not a simple ping this time. Something deeper, richer, a transmission. "Audio channel opening," the comm officer said. "No encryption," another added. "No encoding, it's raw." "Put it through," Viral ordered. For a brief moment, there was only static. Then, a voice. "Contact confirmed." It was unlike anything they had ever heard. Heavy, measured, ancient. Each word felt deliberate, as if spoken by something that had not used language in a very long time. Viral's breath caught. "Translate." The comm officer turned pale. "Commander, it's already in galactic standard." That realization hit harder than any weapon. The voice continued. "You approached a dormant human vessel." Human. The word echoed across the bridge. Unfamiliar. And yet, unsettling. Fragments of forgotten records flickered in Viral's memory. Ancient archives, dismissed myths. A species that had once existed and then vanished. Extinct. Irrelevant. Impossible. Protocol breached. The weapons shifted, perfectly aligned now. Locked. Ready. Viral stood abruptly. "Wait, we are not hostile. Identify your intentions." The voice cut through him. "Threat classification, confirmed." "No," Viral stepped toward the comm station. "That's a misunderstanding." Too late. One of the weapons fired. There was no build-up. No warning flare. Just a single, thin beam of light. It crossed the distance between the ships in an instant and touched the patrol vessel's shields. And then, the shields disappeared. Not weakened. Not overloaded. Gone. Erased as if they had never existed. The crew stared in disbelief. "That's impossible," someone choked. There was no time for anything else. The beam continued. It touched the hull, and reality folded. No explosion. No debris. No shockwave. The ship simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there. The next, empty space. Silence. Cold, absolute silence. The unknown vessel powered down almost immediately, its weapons retracting back into the hull as if they had never been there. The shifting structures settled. The impossible geometry stilled. Once again, it became what it had appeared to be at first glance. A silent, drifting object in the void. Dormant. Waiting. But something had changed. A signal now pulsed outward from it, steady, repeating. A message. Simple. Clear. Unmistakable. Do not approach. Across the sector, distant sensors registered the anomaly, an energy fluctuation, brief and inexplicable. Then nothing. No wreckage. No survivors. No evidence. Only absence. And yet the message continued to echo through the void. Do not approach. Far beyond the edges of the system, long-range listening posts began to pick it up. Then relay stations. Then entire networks. The signal spread. Quiet. Cold. Unignorables. And with it came a question that would soon grip the entire galaxy. What kind of civilization leaves behind a ship that doesn't just destroy its enemies, but erases them from existence? The vessel drifted in silence once more, unmoving, unchanged, but no longer unknown. Because now, the galaxy had been warned, and somewhere deep within that silent structure, something was no longer asleep. The message spread faster than any fleet. Do not approach. It echoed across relays, slipped through trade networks, embedded itself in civilian channels. At first, it was treated like a corrupted transmission, some glitch bouncing endlessly between systems. But then the patrol ship failed to report in. Then its telemetry vanished. Then its entire existence ended. No debris, no escape pods, no distress signal. Just absence. Within a single cycle, the incident reached the Galactic Council. And within minutes, they dismissed it. Unverified data, one delegate scoffed. Sensor distortion, said another. Or fabrication, added a third. The council chamber, a vast structure of floating platforms and shimmering light, buzzed with overlapping voices. Representatives from dozens of species debated, argued, and ultimately did what they always did when faced with something inconvenient. They minimized it. There are no known technologies capable of erasing a vessel without residue, declared High Analyst Sarun. Such claims contradict established physics. And this human vessel, another voice chimed in. Humans are extinct. Their civilization collapsed before most of us achieved interstellar travel. Exactly, Sarun said, which makes this either misinterpretation or myth. A pause. Then, predictably, send a fleet. Not a cautious one. Not a scientific expedition. A show of force. Because if something unknown existed in their space, the Council's instinct wasn't to understand it. It was to dominate it. And so the Second Expeditionary Fleet was assembled. 23 warships, heavily armed, heavily shielded, commanded by Admiral Corath of the Velnar Dominion. Where Viral had been cautious, Corath was not. Where Viral had hesitated, Corath advanced. As his fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Perseus expanse, his deep, resonant voice filled the command deck. Confirmed target location. Unknown vessel detected, the sensor officer replied. Coordinates match prior report. Corath leaned forward, a faint grin curling at the edge of his mandibles. And the message. Still broadcasting. Do not approach. The words repeated across every channel. Calm, unchanging. Corath chuckled. How quaint. The bridge crew exchanged uneasy glances, but none spoke against him. Open a channel, Corath ordered. Channel open. This is Admiral Corath of the Velnar Dominion, he announced, voice amplified and authoritative. Unidentified vessel, you are in restricted space. Power down and prepare to be boarded. Silence answered. The message continued. Do not approach. Corath's grin widened. It's automated, he said. A relic, nothing more. Admiral, one of his officers said carefully, the first patrol. Was incompetent, Corath snapped. Or unlucky, either way we are not them. He rose to his full height, towering over the command platform. Bring us closer. Admiral, that is an order. The fleet advanced. Engines burned bright against the darkness, cutting through the void with confidence and power. On the forward display, the silent vessel came into view. Still drifting. Still dark. Still waiting. Range 10,000 meters, the sensor officer reported. No change in target behavior. Of course not, Corath said. It's dead. Do not approach. The message repeated again, softer now, almost drowned out by the hum of the fleet. Range 5,000 meters. Something shifted. Not visibly. Not dramatically. But the sensors picked it up instantly. Energy surge detected, the officer shouted. Corath's expression didn't change. Source. The entire vessel. That answer again. Impossible. Weapons coming online, another officer yelled. The display lit up as the silent ship transformed. Its hull unfolded, expanded, reconfigured into impossible shapes, structures emerging from within like a machine remembering how to be a weapon. And this time, it didn't stop at dozens. Or hundreds. It kept going. "Admiral," the tactical officer whispered, voice cracking, "it's targeting." All ships, another finished. Every weapon system locked simultaneously. 23 warships. 23 targets. All acquired in less than a second. For the first time, Corath's confidence faltered. "Do not approach." The message played again. But this time, it sounded different. Not like a warning. Like a conclusion. "Open fire," Corath roared. The fleet responded instantly. Beams, missiles, plasma arcs. An overwhelming barrage surged toward the silent vessel, enough firepower to shatter moons. The void lit up. For a moment, it looked like victory. Then, the attacks vanished. Not deflected. Not absorbed. Erased. As if they had never been fired. A chill swept through the fleet. And then the human vessel spoke. Clear. Cold. Unavoidable. Warning ignored. A pause. Long enough for fear to take root. Engaging. The weapons aligned. Not individually. Collectively. As one system. One intention. One decision. Corath's voice dropped to a whisper. "What is that?" No one answered. Because deep down, they all knew. This wasn't a relic. This wasn't a derelict. This wasn't even a ship in the way they understood it. This was something else. Something older. Something patient. Something that had been waiting. For someone to make a mistake. And now, they had. The first beam fired. And the fleet began to disappear. The first ship vanished before anyone could even scream. One moment it was there, shields blazing, weapons firing. The next, gone. Not destroyed. Not shattered. Erased. A gap appeared in the formation where it had been, perfectly clean, like a missing piece in reality itself. "Report," Admiral Corath roared, his voice breaking for the first time. "No debris, no energy residue, it's just gone," the sensor officer shouted. Another beam fired. Then another. Each one precise. Each one final. A second warship disappeared. Then a third. Panic spread like fire across the fleet. Evasive maneuvers. Break formation. Return fire, return fire. The void exploded with light as the fleet unleashed everything it had. Plasma storms, antimatter lances, gravitational disruptors, an entire armada's worth of firepower poured into a single target. And none of it mattered. Every shot that reached the human vessel simply ceased to exist. Not deflected. Not absorbed. Removed. As if the laws of physics had been overridden. "Admiral, we can't hit it," the tactical officer cried. "It's like our attacks are being deleted." Corath gripped the edge of his command platform, mandibles clenched tight. "Then get us closer, if this is some kind of field." "Sir, we're already within optimal range." Another beam lanced through space. A fourth ship vanished. Then a fifth. The formation collapsed completely as vessels scattered in all directions, trying desperately to escape an enemy they couldn't fight. "Do not approach." The message echoed again, still calm, still unchanged, playing across every channel like a mocking reminder. "Shut that thing off," Corath snapped. "We can't, Admiral. It's embedded in our systems. It's overriding." The officer's voice cut off mid-sentence. His station blinked out of existence. The section of the ship where he stood. Gone. The crew froze. Where there had once been consoles, bodies, structure, there was now open void, held back only by emergency containment fields screaming under the strain. Corath stared at it, uncomprehending. "It can target internally," someone whispered. That was when fear truly took hold. Not fear of defeat, but fear of something far worse. They weren't being attacked. They were being judged. Another transmission cut through the chaos. Not the repeating warning. Something new. The same ancient voice from before, calm, heavy, unshaken by the destruction unfolding. Escalation confirmed. Corath's head snapped toward the comm display. Respond, he barked. Tell it we withdraw, tell it this engagement is over. The comm officer scrambled, sending signals across every frequency. This is Admiral Corath. We are disengaging. Cease fire immediately. For a brief moment, the beam stopped. The human vessel remained still, its countless weapons hovering in perfect alignment. Silent, watching, hope flickered across the bridge. Then the voice returned. Withdrawal acknowledged. A breath, a fragile, desperate breath. Then, too late, the beams fired again. But this time, they changed. Instead of targeting individual ships, the energy spread outward, forming a vast, invisible net across the surrounding space. Admiral, what is it doing? The sensor officer whispered. Corath didn't answer. He couldn't, because he was watching the readings, watching the impossible unfold. It's not targeting us anymore, the officer continued. It's targeting everything. Space itself began to distort. Not violently, not chaotically, but smoothly, like fabric being pulled tight. Jump drives offline. Navigation systems failing. We're trapped. The realization hit all at once. This wasn't an attack. This was containment. The fleet wasn't being destroyed one by one anymore. They were being sealed. Threat cluster identified, the voice said. Code final. Containment protocol engaged. Corath's breath came slow and heavy. This is extermination, he whispered. Around him, ships tried to flee, engines burning, systems screaming, but there was nowhere left to go. The net tightened. Reality folded inward. One by one, the remaining warships flickered. And vanished. Not into fire. Not into wreckage. But into nothing. Corath's flagship was the last. As the edges of space itself began to collapse around him, he stared at the silent vessel, unchanged, unmoved, untouched. And for the first time in his life, he understood. This wasn't a battle. This wasn't even a war. This was a mistake. A catastrophic, irreversible mistake. And they had made it together. His final thought wasn't of glory or victory, but of the message they had ignored. Do not approach. The words echoed one last time. And then everything went dark. The sector fell silent again. No fleet. No wreckage. No trace that anything had ever been there. Only the human vessel remained. Drifting. Dormant. Waiting. And now, watching for the next mistake, the silence that followed was worse than the destruction. Because silence could be ignored. Silence could be explained away. But absence demanded answers. 23 warships didn't just disappear, not without debris, not without radiation, not without a single surviving signal. And yet, that was exactly what had happened. Across the Galactic Council, panic began to seep through the cracks of authority. At first, they tried to control the narrative. Fleet communication failure. Experimental weapon malfunction. Localized anomaly. But the truth refused to stay buried. Because the message was still spreading. Do not approach. It repeated endlessly, slipping through encrypted channels, overriding communication arrays, embedding itself into civilian broadcasts. Entire systems began receiving it simultaneously, without origin, without delay. And worse, now it was being recorded, analyzed, studied, the voice, the structure, the language. It's not artificial, said Chief Archivist Lurek during an emergency session of the Council. This is not an automated defense system. The speech patterns, there's intent behind them, decision-making. From what? One delegate snapped. An empty ship. Lurek hesitated, then activated the chamber's central archive projection. Ancient data flooded the space. Fragmented logs, corrupted star maps, broken transmissions recovered from the earliest days of interstellar travel. Not empty, Lurek said quietly. Abandoned. A name appeared across the projection. Humanity. The chamber stirred. That's impossible, another counselor said immediately. Humans are extinct. That is what we believed, Lurek replied, because that is what the records say. And you think those records are wrong. I think those records are incomplete. The projection shifted again, this time showing ancient battle formations, ship schematics unlike anything currently in use. Sleek, angular, adaptive. Familiar. Too familiar. They didn't disappear, Lurek continued. They withdrew. Why would an entire species vanish? Someone demanded. Lurek didn't answer right away. Instead, he brought up a final piece of data, a corrupted transmission, barely intelligible. The audio crackled, distorted with age. Containment breach, fallback protocol, last directive. The voice cut out, but the implication remained. Humans weren't just another species, Lurek said. They were something else. Their technology doesn't follow our models. It doesn't scale the way ours does. It evolves. A pause. Then quietly, they built systems that could think, decide, adapt. A cold realization spread across the chamber. You're suggesting that vessel, one counselor began slowly, isn't just a ship. Lurek met their gaze. Yes, it's a weapon system. No, Lurek said. Something in his voice made the entire chamber go still. It's a guardian. The word hung in the air like a verdict. Before anyone could respond, alarms erupted across the chamber. Emergency signal incoming, an operator shouted. Multiple systems reporting anomalies. Display it. The projection shifted again, but this time it wasn't historical data. It was live. A distant sector. A trade convoy. Civilian vessels, unarmed, drifting along a routine route. And in the center of their formation, a familiar shape. Black. Silent. Watching. No, someone whispered. It moved, another said. That ship, it moved. But how? It never left its position. Then how is it there? The answer came from Lurek, barely audible. There isn't just one. The chamber fell into stunned silence. On the projection, the convoy attempted to turn to flee, but it was already too late. The same signal pulsed across their systems. Do not approach. But this time, it wasn't a warning. It was a reminder. The human vessel didn't deploy its weapons immediately. It didn't need to, because something else was happening. The convoy's engines shut down. Their communications froze. Navigation systems failed. They're being locked down, the operator said, completely immobilized. Why? A counselor demanded. They're not military targets. Lurek stared at the projection, his expression darkening. Because they crossed a boundary. What boundary? No one had an answer. But the human vessel did. The ancient voice returned, echoing across the chamber through the live feed. Perimeter violation confirmed. A pause. Then, expanding containment zone. The stars themselves seemed to shift, as invisible lines spread outward from the vessel's position. Not lines of energy. Not fields. Something deeper. Something embedded into the fabric of space. Wait, the operator said, voice shaking. It's not just targeting the convoy. What do you mean? It's mapping the entire sector. A ripple of dread passed through the council. Because they were starting to understand. This wasn't retaliation. This wasn't defense. This was something far more terrifying. It was reclamation. The convoy vanished. Not violently. Not suddenly, but completely. And as the projection cut to static, the message echoed once more. Not just in that sector, but everywhere. Do not approach. Lurek closed his eyes. They're not attacking us, he said quietly. The chamber turned toward him. Then what are they doing? Someone whispered. Lurek opened his eyes again, and this time there was no uncertainty in them. They're waking up, he said, and we're already inside their territory. Far beyond the Council's reach, deep in the darkness between stars, more silent vessels began to stir. Unseen, uncounted, waiting, and now, no longer alone, the panic didn't erupt all at once. It spread, slow, controlled, contained at first, because no one wanted to say it out loud. Not in the council chambers, not in military command, not across civilian networks. But the truth was already there, creeping through every system like a quiet infection. There wasn't just one vessel. There never had been. Confirmed sightings now at 17 separate sectors, the operations director reported, voice tight with strain. All identical signatures, all broadcasting the same message. Do not approach. The words echoed again through the chamber, softer now, familiar in the worst possible way. And the containment zones? A counselor asked. The director hesitated, then said it anyway. Expanding. A ripple of unease moved through the chamber. How fast? Not fast, the director replied. Deliberate. That made it worse. If it had been rapid expansion, they could call it an attack, a wave, a war. But this was measured, calculated, controlled. They're drawing boundaries, Lurek said quietly from his position near the archive console. All eyes turned to him. Based on what? Someone demanded. Lurek didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled up a layered star map, current galactic territory overlaid with ancient, fragmented data recovered from pre-council archives. At first, it looked like chaos. Random lines, broken sectors, incomplete coordinates. But then, the patterns aligned. Gasps spread across the chamber. No, one counselor whispered. The highlighted regions formed vast, interconnected zones across the galaxy. Zones that the newly detected vessels were now occupying. Zones that were beginning to be reclaimed. These aren't random positions, Lurek said. They're borders. Borders of what? Another demanded. Lurek's voice dropped. Human space. Silence crushed the chamber. That's impossible, someone said weakly. Human civilization collapsed before we charted half these regions. No, Lurek replied. We assumed they collapsed because they vanished, but what if they didn't collapse? What if they withdrew? The implications settled like a weight no one could lift. They left markers, Lurek continued. Not physical, not detectable by our systems, but something deeper, something their own technology could recognize. And now, the operations director asked. Lurek looked at the map, at the glowing lines slowly reappearing across the stars. Now something is turning those markers back on. As if summoned by his words, another alert blared. New event, an operator shouted. Sector D41, civilian colony, millions of inhabitants. Display it. The projection shifted. A thriving world appeared, cities glowing across its surface, orbital platforms circling in steady motion. Then, a shadow, not cast by a star, but by something moving between them. A human vessel, identical to the others. Silent, watching. No, a counselor whispered. They're not a threat, they're civilians. The message echoed across the feed. Do not approach. But the colony hadn't approached. It had simply existed. Why is it targeting them? Another demanded. Lurek didn't answer. Because he already knew. They're inside the boundary, he said. On the projection, panic erupted across the colony. Ships launched from the surface. Stations powered up defenses. Civilian channels flooded with confusion and fear. "This is the Galactic Council," a transmission burst across the feed. "Unidentified vessel, this is a populated world. State your intentions." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ancient voice returned. "Territorial breach confirmed." The words hit harder than any weapon. "Wait, no," the counselor leaned forward desperately. "They don't even know." "Evacuation window denied." The chamber froze. "Denied? They're not even giving them a chance," someone whispered. The vessel's structure began to shift. Not violently, not dramatically, but purposefully. Its systems awakened, not in aggression but in inevitability. "Can we intervene?" the operations director demanded. "Send a fleet, jam the signal, anything." "No," Lurek said. The word was quiet. "Final." "No," the director snapped. "We can't just watch." "If we send a fleet," Lurek interrupted, "we won't save them." "A beat. We'll join them." The realization settled in, cold and absolute. On the projection, the colony's defenses opened fire, desperate, uncoordinated. Their weapons vanished before they reached the vessel. Just like before, as if they had never existed. Then the space around the planet began to change. Subtly at first. A distortion. A shift. Like reality itself was tightening its grip. A containment field established. The voice was calm. Unmoved. The orbital stations flickered. And disappeared. One by one. No explosions. No debris. Just absence. Panic on the surface reached its peak. And then, the planet itself began to fade. Slowly, silently, as if being erased from existence layer by layer. "No," someone whispered in the chamber. "This isn't war." No, it was. It was something far more terrifying. It was correction. Within minutes, the planet was gone. Not destroyed. Not shattered. Gone, as if it had never been there at all. The projection cut to empty space. The chamber stood in stunned silence. No one spoke. No one moved. Because now, they understood. This wasn't about hostility. This wasn't about dominance. This was about ownership. And they had been living inside something that didn't belong to them. Lurek stared at the empty space where the colony had been. His voice barely audible. "They're not expanding," he said. "They're restoring." Far across the galaxy, more lines lit up. More vessels awakened. More boundaries returned. And for the first time in galactic history, every species, every empire, every civilization faced the same terrifying truth. They hadn't inherited the stars. They had been allowed to use them. And now, that permission was being revoked. Panic had burned itself out. What remained was something colder. Acceptance and the desperate need to understand. Across the galaxy, transmissions slowed. Fleets halted at the edges of newly defined boundaries. Entire trade networks collapsed overnight, unwilling to risk crossing invisible lines that meant instant erasure. No one questioned the message anymore. "Do not approach." They obeyed it, because now they knew what happened if they didn't. But obedience wasn't enough, because the boundaries kept appearing. Sector by sector, system by system. Not random, not chaotic, precise, deliberate, and closing in. "They're mapping everything," the operations director said during what had become a permanent emergency session of the council. "Every star, every route, every inhabited system." "And then deciding," another added quietly, "whether it belongs." No one argued, because that was exactly what it looked like. The massive star map in the chamber had changed. Once a vibrant web of civilizations and connections, it was now fractured, cut apart by expanding zones of absence. Regions where nothing remained. Not even light behaved the same there anymore. It bent differently, moved differently, as if reality itself remembered something the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. Lurek stood at the center of it all, surrounded by layers of ancient data no one else had the patience or courage to examine. "You're missing it," he said. The chamber turned toward him again. "Missing what?" a counselor demanded, exhaustion sharpening their voice. "This isn't just territory," Lurek said. "It's a pattern." "We've established that," the operations director replied. "They're reclaiming human space." "No," Lurek said. His tone stopped the room. "It's not just human space." A ripple of confusion spread. "Explain." Lurek activated another overlay, deeper this time. Older, fragmented beyond recognition until now. And when it aligned, the chamber went silent. Because the new pattern didn't just map where the vessels were appearing. It mapped where they were. "There are gaps," Lurek said. "Safe zones?" someone asked hopefully. "No," he replied, "exclusions." He zoomed in on one of the surviving regions, densely populated, heavily trafficked, completely untouched. "Why would they ignore this?" the operations director asked. "It's deep inside what should be their territory." Lurek's expression darkened. "Because it was never theirs to begin with." That didn't make sense. Until he brought up the final layer. Ancient records, pre-human, barely understood. Coordinates marked with warnings in languages long extinct. Restricted zones. Quarantined regions. The same regions the human vessels were now avoiding. "They're not reclaiming everything," Lurek said slowly. "They're restoring boundaries that existed before them." A cold realization settled over the chamber. "You're saying," a counselor began, voice shaking, "humans weren't the first." Lurek didn't answer directly. He didn't need to. Because the data already had. Before anyone could process that, alarms erupted again, louder this time, sharper. "Mass emergence event," an operator shouted. "Multiple vessels, hundreds, no, thousands appearing simultaneously." "Where?" The answer came with a map that changed everything. "Everywhere." The projection lit up, points of light igniting across the galaxy like a spreading fire. Not random. Not scattered. Synchronized. The dormant vessels weren't just waking up anymore. They were activating together. And for the first time, they weren't silent. A new signal surged across every channel, every system, every device capable of receiving it. Not the simple warning. Not the calm directive. Something deeper. Something final. The ancient voice returned, but now it wasn't one voice. It was many. Layered. Unified. Global assessment complete. The words echoed everywhere at once. The council chamber froze. Civilian networks went dark. Entire fleets powered down just to listen. Non-compliant occupation detected. The message continued, unrelenting. Restoration phase entering final stage. "No," the operations director whispered. "Final stage." Lurek stared at the map, at the countless vessels now fully active. His voice was barely audible. They weren't fully awake before. That realization hit like a shockwave. Everything they had seen so far. The fleets erased. The sectors reclaimed. The planets removed. That hadn't been the full system. That had been preparation. On the projection, one of the newly awakened vessels moved. Not to a boundary. Not to a colony. But to something far more dangerous. A safe zone. One of the excluded regions. "No," Lurek said, stepping forward. "That's not possible." "Why would it go there?" someone asked. Lurek didn't answer. Because for the first time, he didn't know. The vessel stopped at the edge of the region. For a moment, everything held its breath. Then, the voice spoke again. Not calm this time. Not measured. But different. External anomaly detected. The chamber went completely still. External. Not internal. Not part of the galaxy they knew. Something else. Origin classification, unknown. The words sent a chill through every living being listening. Unknown. After everything these vessels could do. After everything they had already identified and erased. There was still something they didn't recognize. The vessel didn't attack. Didn't retreat. It hesitated. For the first time since any of this began. The system paused. And that terrified Lurek more than anything. Because if something could make this hesitate, then whatever lay inside that region was not something humanity had built. Escalation protocol pending, the voice said. A long silence followed. Long enough for hope to flicker. And die. All units prepare for conflict. The message spread instantly across the entire network of human vessels. Not a warning. Not a directive. A command. And for the first time since they awakened, they weren't addressing the galaxy. They were addressing each other. Lurek stepped back slowly, his mind racing. They're not just restoring territory, he said. The chamber looked at him. Then what are they doing? Someone whispered. Lurek's answer came like a final, irreversible truth. They're preparing for a war. He looked at the map, at the boundary they had avoided until now. That they were built to fight. The galaxy had spent centuries believing it had inherited the stars. That belief died in silence. No explosion marked its end. No grand announcement declared its collapse. Just a slow, undeniable realization spreading across every surviving world. They had never been alone. They had never been first. And they had never been safe. The human vessels, those silent, impossible guardians, now filled the void in numbers beyond counting. Entire constellations dimmed behind their presence, their black hulls swallowing starlight as they repositioned across newly restored boundaries. But this time they weren't facing inward. They were facing out, toward the regions they had avoided, toward the places marked long before humanity had ever existed, toward something the galaxy had unknowingly built its civilizations around, without ever understanding why those areas had been left untouched. Until now, in the council chamber, no one spoke anymore. There were no debates left, no strategies, no illusions of control, only observation and dread. The projection before them displayed the largest convergence of human vessels ever recorded, thousands gathering at the edge of a single forbidden region. A region now classified with a word no one wanted to say. Unknown. They're forming a perimeter, the operations director whispered almost reverently. No, Lurek said quietly. They're forming a line. A line not to keep others out, but to hold something in. The realization hit the chamber like a physical force. Whatever is in there, someone said, voice trembling, they're afraid of it. No, Lurek replied. His eyes never left the projection. They're ready for it. As if responding to that thought, the network of human vessels activated simultaneously. Their structures shifted, not into attack formations aimed at the galaxy, but into something far more complex. Interlocking geometries, overlapping fields, systems linking together across impossible distances. Not separate ships anymore. A single system. A world. And then, the signal changed. Not the warning. Not the cold directives. Something new. Broadcast across every frequency. Every language. Every system. A message meant not just to be heard, but understood. Final directive acknowledged. The voices, plural now, layered into one, echoed through the stars. Humanity absent. A pause. Heavy. Guardianship remains. Lurek closed his eyes. They're still following orders, he whispered. But there's no one left to give them. On the projection, the forbidden region began to react. At first it was subtle. A distortion in the darkness. A ripple where no matter existed. Then, The stars behind it disappeared. Not blocked, not hidden, gone, as if something was moving between reality itself. The human vessels didn't retreat. They didn't hesitate. They held position. Breach detected. The words carried a weight that even the Council could feel. Containment failure imminent. No, the operations director breathed. They can't stop it. Lurek didn't answer. Because for the first time, the human vessels were outmatched. The darkness shifted again. And something emerged. Not a ship. Not a structure. Something that didn't belong to any known form of existence. It wasn't bound by shape. It wasn't bound by light. It simply was. A presence. Vast, wrong, endless. And it was pushing through. The human vessels responded instantly. Their combined systems flared, creating a barrier that lit up the void like a second galaxy. Energy surged, space warped, reality strained. Engaging full containment. The voice was still calm, still controlled. But beneath it, there was strain. For the first time, the Guardians were struggling. The entity pushed harder. The barrier bent. Cracks impossible, conceptual fractures spread across the containment line. This is what they were built for, Lurek whispered. And it's not enough. The chamber watched in silence as the impossible battle unfolded, not with explosions or weapons, but with the very fabric of existence being rewritten in real time. The galaxy wasn't being attacked. It was collateral, a side effect of something far older than any civilization alive. The barrier faltered, just for a moment, but that moment was enough. A fragment of the entity slipped through. Small, insignificant compared to the whole. And yet, as it entered known space, entire star systems flickered. Then vanished. Not targeted. Not chosen. Just erased by proximity. A collective horror spread across every observer. That's not a weapon, someone whispered. Its existence undone. The human vessels reacted instantly. A portion of their formation broke away, surrounding the fragment, isolating it, containing it again, barely. But the cost was immediate. The main barrier weakened. The entity pressed forward. Containment integrity critical. The voice echoed again. But now, there was something new in it. Not fear, not panic, but finality. Lurek stepped forward, his mind racing through everything he had learned. Everything they had misunderstood. They weren't protecting their territory, he said slowly. The chamber turned toward him. They were protecting us. The truth landed like a collapsing star. All this time, the warnings, the boundaries, the erasures. It wasn't punishment. It was prevention. They hadn't been reclaiming the galaxy. They had been trying to fix it. Trying to put everything back where it wouldn't trigger something far worse. And the galaxy, in its arrogance, had ignored every warning, violated every boundary, broken every rule it didn't even know existed. The first patrol, the second fleet, the countless crossings, each one pushing the system closer to failure, each one weakening the very thing that had been holding the darkness back. Lurek's voice broke. The mistake, he whispered. It was never theirs. On the projection, the barrier shattered. Not completely, but enough. The entity surged forward, and the galaxy realized the truth far too late. The human vessels weren't the end. They were the last line of defense. And now, that line was breaking.